Okay, so
why is it called Sweetener?
Because it's kind of about like bringing light to a situation or to someone's life, or somebody else who brings light to your life, or sweetening the situation. Yeah.
Everyone needs a little sweetener.
Yeah.
Ariana Grande's discography is a great example of a natural evolution and growth throughout an artist's career. You have Yours Truly, her debut album. She was still with Nickelodeon, so her image was kept clean, but it struck a nice balance of being kid-friendly while also sounding mature enough for adults to enjoy. Her sophomore album, My Everything, still kept things rather clean. She was on her way out of Nickelodeon though and becoming a pop force. The subject matter and lyrics on this album were a little more mature, but nothing too crazy. Next, we get to her third album, Dangerous Woman, where we really saw Ariana coming out of her shell and completely ditching the kid-friendly image. Dangerous Woman was a deliberate move to show her maturity and distance herself from Nickelodeon and embrace her womanhood. By the time of her third album's release, Ariana was pretty much inescapable. She'd had multiple hits and pretty much done the typical pop thing. It was only natural that her next album would be something more experimental and more personal. What we got was a masterpiece. Sweetener is one of my favorite albums of all time and perhaps the most vital album in Ariana's discography, second only to what came right after it. Nonetheless, the album has a spectacular look into a side of Ariana Grande that the world hadn't seen yet. She was no longer concerned with being a pop star. It was the beginning of her navigating her career on her own terms. She'd already proven herself as a staple in the music industry by this point, starting with the cover art of the album, which is a simple portrait of Ariana flipped upside down. Ariana stated that at the time of creating the album, she felt rather upside down, and that can be seen when looking at the context of the album's release. The year of Sweetener's release had been a whirlwind for the then 25-year-old singer. The tragic Manchester bombing at the Manchester stop of her Dangerous Woman tour had occurred the prior year, and Ariana later went on record saying how the incident caused her to have post-traumatic stress disorder. She ended her 2-year relationship with Mac Miller and in the same month began dating and became engaged to Pete Davidson. All of this occurring while being one of the most watched public figures on the planet. It's also worthy of note that this album cover was Ariana's first to be in color, a representation of a new chapter in both her life and her career. Sweetener is ultimately about healing and bringing light to a situation despite feeling like life is turning you upside down. It was truly Ariana's most personal record to date. It's definitely more personal. You know, I feel like Dangerous Woman was a grown-up My Everything, and this is a grown-up Yours Truly.
Oof. These two, I feel like, sound like my DNA.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or how I wish I felt. Not how I feel, but how I'm striving to feel.
Listen, when you sing these songs on stage, okay, you will tell people the story of how you felt when we were doing this song. That's what is so amazing.
Yeah.
You will have this to look back on.
It's an escape.
100%.
Not only did Ariana reveal more of who she was on the album, but she expanded her sound as well. R&B and pop were always her bread and butter, but she took it even further with this album, diving into alternative R&B, hip-hop, neo-soul, house, funk, and trap. Legendary producer Pharrell Williams produced multiple tracks on the album and also provided vocals, giving Ariana a refreshing new sound. Sweetener was much more than just another pop album. It was a soft reboot in many ways for Ariana. The Sweetener era kicked off with the release of its lead single, No Tears Left to Cry, on April 20th, 2018. It was Ariana's big comeback at the time and a fitting return to music with the song's theme of rising above negativity and overcoming one's struggles. In my aforementioned video about album eras, I stated how lead singles often set the tone of the era and give the listeners a taste of what to expect from the forthcoming album. No Tears Left to Cry is a fantastic example of this and was the perfect choice for Sweetener's lead single in my opinion. The song peaked at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Worthy of note, 2018 was a year dominated by rap and hip-hop acts. Drake, Travis Scott, Post Malone, Cardi B, and the like all ruled the charts consistently all year. And that's not a bad thing at all. Rap and hip-hop had long been overlooked in the mainstream, and it was long overdue for it to have its time to shine. Keep in mind that right before that, the EDM boom pretty much conquered all of the music industry, and nothing that wasn't David Guetta or anything like that was going to do anything on the charts. I just wanted to point that out because of the fact that Ariana was almost the sole pop star holding her own on the charts during a year where pop music pretty much took a back seat. The Light Is Coming featuring Nicki Minaj was released as a promotional single from the album on June 20th, 2018. Keeping with the theme established with the album's lead single, the theme of this song is optimism and bringing light to a situation. I distinctly remember when this song was released, a lot of people weren't fond of it at all, but I absolutely love it, and I see it as one of the album's highlights. It has such a distinct sound and doesn't sound like anything else on the album or in Ariana's entire discography. God Is a Woman served as the second single from Sweetener, being released on July 13, 2018. A pop/hip-hop female empowerment banger, the song is yet another highlight from the album. The official album release followed soon after on August 17, 2018, with the song Breathin' being released as the third and final single from the album on September 18, 2018. Sweetener debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and according to Billboard itself, is one of the 15 best performing albums of the 21st century without having any of its singles hit number 1. Although in my opinion, No Tears and God Is a Woman both deserve to be number 1. Drake was simply unstoppable that year, however. Regardless, Sweetener was Ariana's third number 1 album, and to this day is her fastest selling album. It scored the second largest sales debut in the US, only behind Cardi B's Invasion of Privacy. Once again, Billboard noted that Sweetener's strong performance on streaming was remarkable since rap music dominated the market at the time. The album would also later on earn Ariana her first ever Grammy Award.
Here we go, and the Grammy goes to Sweetener, Ariana Grande.
Despite it being such a monumental album and era for Ariana, Sweetener's album cycle was relatively short, only lasting 7 months. I mentioned before that by this point she was a pop force, but what was to come would cement her as an absolute pop icon. On November 3rd, 2018, Ariana Grande surprise released the song Thank You Next. A celebratory ode to her past failed relationships, the song was even more culturally stimulating due to the then recent end of her engagement to Pete Davidson and the unfortunate passing of her ex-boyfriend Mac Miller. The song became Ariana's first ever number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and made Ariana the first female artist to debut at number 1 on the chart since Adele's Hello 3 years prior. It broke the record for most streams by a song in a single day on Spotify with 8 million streams globally, continuing to break the record daily until it reached 9.6 million daily streams. It would surpass 100 million streams on Spotify just 11 days after its release, becoming the fastest song to do so. Thank You Next is widely considered to be a cultural phenomenon, inspiring several memes, and was included on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. Its accompanying music video was released on November 30th, 2018 and broke the records for both the most watched music video on YouTube within 24 hours and the fastest Vivo video to reach 100 million views on YouTube. Ariana Grande had taken over the world, but her reign wouldn't let up just yet. In the midst of pushing the song Breathin' as the third single from Sweetener, news of the passing of Mac Miller hit and Ariana took a brief hiatus in order to grieve. All promotion for Sweetener was halted. Shortly after, Ariana would also end her 5-month engagement to Pete Davidson. Despite all of this, she would also find the time and drive to begin recording new material just 2 months after the release of Sweetener. The end result came together rather swiftly, being completed in roughly a month's time. Nonetheless, it will become Ariana Grande's magnum opus, an album that she says saved her life. It was Thank You Next. I consider Thank You Next and Sweetener to be sister albums, 2 halves of a whole chapter in the life of Ariana Grande. In my video talking about Sweetener, I stated how the album was about healing and was Ariana's most personal record to date. Thank You Next acts as almost a sequel of sorts to its predecessor. It dives deeper. Sweetener is more about the optimistic and bubbly side of the healing process as seen in its visuals and promotional artwork. Thank You Next is more raw, pulling back the curtain even more to show the not so pretty parts of the healing process while nonetheless still remaining rather optimistic, going by its title track. Comparing the 2 albums' artworks, you can see that in both of them Ariana is upside down. Sweetener's artwork was inspired by the fact that Ariana felt upside down at the time of its recording. For Thank You Next, she stated that she still feels upside down, but this time she F's with it, meaning she still very much feels upside down, but she's got more of a handle on it. Sweetener and Thank You Next have an almost good girl, bad girl, angel devil dynamic going for them that I've always appreciated, whether it was intentional or not. Following the massive success of the title track, Imagine was released as a promotional single from the album on December 14, 2018. An R&B and pop ballad described by Ariana as being about a simple, beautiful love that is now and forever unattainable. The song is the opening track on Thank You Next and one of my all-time favorite songs by her. I think it is criminally underrated and not talked about nearly enough. Also worthy of note, this was one of the first times that we'd hear Ariana hit her Mariah Carey-esque whistle notes on a song. Imagine unfortunately did not receive a music video, however. Ariana performed it for the first time and one of only 2 times live on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon on December 18, 2018. Seven Rings was released as the official second single from Thank You Next on January 18, 2019. Like the album's lead single, the song debuted at number 1 on the Hot 100, and Ariana joined Mariah Carey and Britney Spears as the only female artist to have 2 or more debuts on the chart. Ariana described the song as a friendship anthem and talks about how her massive success has allowed her to enjoy the finer things in life. Seven Rings earned over 14.9 million plays in its first 24 hours on Spotify, breaking the platform's all-time counter record. The song also broke the Spotify weekly record with over 70 million streams in its first week on the platform. It was also around this time that the Ariana Grande hate train began to move at full speed, and much of it stemmed from this song and its video. Accusations of Ariana using black music and culture as well as Japanese culture for clout ran wild, as well as accusations of plagiarism by Princess Nokia, Soulja Boy, and 2 Chainz. However, Ariana and the latter would meet to discuss the accusations and resolve them. 2 Chainz would later appear on the remix for Seven Rings, and Ariana would provide vocals for 2 Chainz' song Rule the World from his 2019 album Rap or Go to the League. Break Up With Your Girlfriend I'm Bored was released as the third and final single from Thank You Next on February 8, 2019, the same day as the album's release. The song debuted at number 2 on the Hot 100 chart, being blocked by Ariana's own song, as Seven Rings was still holding the top spot at the time. The album's title track also sat at number 3, meaning that Ariana occupied the top 3 spots on the chart, a feat that hadn't been achieved by any artist since the Beatles back in 1964, and making Ariana the first solo and female act to do so. Thank You Next, the album, was released just 5 months and 22 days after Sweetener. Ariana commented on the fact that she was releasing another album so soon after her last one, saying that she dreamed of putting out music like a rapper does and wanted to break certain standards that pop women are held to that men aren't. We have to do the teaser before the single, then do the single, and wait to do the pre-order, and radio has to impact before the video, and we have to do the discount on this day, and all this. It's just like, bruh, I just want to talk to my fans and sing and write music and drop it the way that these boys do. Why do they get to make records like that and I don't? So I do, and I did, and I am, and I will continue to. Thank You Next debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 chart, becoming Ariana's 4th album to do so. Its opening week figure of 360,000 was also the largest for a pop album since Taylor Swift's Reputation in 2017. Overall, the album earned the 8th largest streaming debut ever in the US. Billboard also noted that of the 20 largest streaming weeks at the time, Thank You Next was the only non-hip-hop title present. All 12 songs from the album managed to chart on the Billboard Hot 100, 11 of them being in the top 40, breaking the record for the most simultaneous charting songs in the top 40 for any female artist ever. The album was the second best performing album on the chart in 2019. Ariana would later embark on the Sweetener World Tour, which supported both Sweetener and Thank You Next, and was also one of the headlining performers of the 2019 Coachella Festival. The album was also nominated for 2 Grammy Awards and was placed on Billboard's list of 100 greatest albums of the 2010s decade. Thank You Next truly was a pop culture moment. Growing up with Ariana Grande since her days on Victorious, I always knew that she had something very special. Watching her grow and evolve from album to album was truly something special, but it wasn't until the Sweetener Thank You Next era that I feel like she truly found her musical identity in her own lane. At this point, you couldn't just call her another singer. She was Ariana Grande. She was her own brand of pop star, something beyond just being that girl from Nickelodeon or the new Mariah Carey. Thank You Next was the era that showed the world just who Ariana Grande is. With her biggest era yet under her belt, really only one question remained. Where does one go after taking over the world?
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm.
Wait.
Everybody calm down.
On January 26, 2020, Ariana would give what would be a fitting end to the Thank You Next era with her performance of Imagine, Seven Rings, and Thank You Next at the 62nd Annual Grammy Awards. I remember feeling a conflicting sense of happiness and sadness watching this performance. I was so happy that one of my favorite artists of all time was at her peak, but I also knew that her biggest era to date was coming to a close, and there would inevitably be a long wait before we got any new music. She would still give us new music in the form of a few notable guest appearances that year, however. Between the months of March and May, Ariana would appear on Childish Gambino's song Time from his album 3/15/20, Stuck With You, a duet with Justin Bieber, and her biggest feature of the year, Rain On Me with Lady Gaga. Just a few short months later, Ariana would unexpectedly bless us with an absolute gem of an album. That album was Positions.
It felt nice to be creating from a more healed place, which is nice. I know a lot of people love Thank You Next and want me to always make something like that. I think, but again, I think that I'm happy that that was executed as well as it was, and I'm happy to not be in that kind of pain anymore and to be in a new chapter.
Positions was inspired by Ariana's emotional healing, and while that may not be immediately apparent at first listen, this album is undoubtedly an unapologetic declaration of being wholly and completely in love and using that love as a means to heal from past emotional trauma. Much like Sweetener and Thank You Next, Positions was heavily influenced by Ariana's personal life at the time. Ariana's love life had been in the spotlight for almost her entire career and was arguably made harder to sustain by the fact that her previous love interests were also celebrities in their own right. In January 2020, Ariana began dating a real estate agent named Dalton Gomez. This was undoubtedly her most private relationship to date, as she kept a very low profile on their involvement with each other. Ariana didn't acknowledge the relationship publicly until confirming it in the music video for Stuck With You, the aforementioned joint single with Justin Bieber. It was clear that something was different this time. Something about this relationship was distinct. It provided Ariana the means to move past her past and finally heal from emotional trauma. And all of this was poured into Positions. At first glance, it might seem like nothing more than just another Ariana Grande album, but there's so much more to it. Positions was the closure that Ariana had been searching for so long. It was the light at the end of the tunnel. It was Ariana's happy ending. Many like to write this album off as being unserious and mock it due to its sometimes sexual nature, but I believe there's power and intent behind that. Positions is about intimacy and devotion. Ariana was unapologetically in love. Looking at the various artworks for the album, you can see that Ariana is finally right side up for the first time since Dangerous Woman, a clear indication that she's where she wants to be and has a handle on her life. Positions was the next step in the growth of Ariana Grande, the final chapter in her saga of healing. The title track was released as the lead single from Positions on October 23, 2020. The song debuted at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and is tied with Thank You Next as Ariana's longest-running top 10 single in the United States. Not to reference myself yet again, but I mentioned how lead singles set the tone of the era before, and Positions perfectly does that for its parent album. It is a sexy mid-tempo fusion of pop and R&B that only an artist like Ariana can pull off. On the track, she talks about hopeless and unconditional devotion to one's lover, a prominent theme on the parent album. All of Ariana's lead singles are iconic in their own right, but Positions just really does it for me. Not only is it my favorite lead single of hers, but it's also probably in my top 10 songs of hers. And that's saying something considering I'm usually more of a fan of deep cuts and album tracks. Generally, I'm a fan of the songs in artist discographies that sound nothing like anything else they've put out. Songs like Be Alright, The Light Is Coming, Imagine, and NASA are some of my all-time favorites from Ariana because they sound so distinct when put against other songs in her catalog.
Also, shout out to everyone that still is surprised when I'm sexual. It's so funny and it makes me really happy.
Positions, the album, was released on October 30th, 2020, with 3435 being released as the second single just 3 days later on November 3rd, 2020. A standout on the album, the song is wonderfully raunchy and the most overtly sexual that Ariana has ever been on a song. While at surface level, many would write this off as being nothing but another song about sex, I think this song, along with Nasty, one of the deep cuts on the album, perfectly represent what Positions is all about. In addition to being about unconditional devotion and love, the album also showcases Ariana owning her sexuality and not being ashamed to express that side of herself. I consider Positions to be a spiritual successor to 2016's Dangerous Woman in the sense that both albums showcased an elevated sexual maturity for Ariana. On both of these albums, she was far more candid about this side of herself, with Dangerous Woman hinting at it with songs like Let Me Love You and Everyday. Positions showcased an even more mature and free Ariana that was comfortable with expressing her womanhood. 3435 debuted at number 8 and later peaked at number 2, being blocked by Olivia Rodrigo's Driver's License. The song was Ariana's 18th top 10 song, tying her with Beyonce for the 8th most amongst women in the entire history of the chart. The official remix of 3435 was released on January 15, 2021 and features verses from Doja Cat and Megan Thee Stallion. Doja Cat's verse was originally meant to be on the main song, but it was scrapped in favor of her verse on Motive, another track on Positions.
Well, it's a tricky one because it's also like, of course you love yourself before you're able to fully love someone else, of course. And this isn't really about that in a way. It's just kind of about, you know how everyone has the little things that you're like, ugh, how could you like that, you know? And you see someone who you're madly in love with, love that. And you're just kind of like, I'm floored. Like I'm like choking up. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oof, I want to feel that, you know?
POV, the final track on the standard edition of Positions, was released as the third and final single from the album on March 23, 2021. Notably, the only slow song on the album, the song talks about how love can smooth out imperfections and the desire to see oneself through the eyes of their lover. On the song, Ariana mentions how deeply her lover, Dalton Gomez, understands and loves her, how much more understood and adored the singer feels through his eyes, as well as her insecurities, her initial fear of starting a relationship again, and how Gomez has helped her overcome it. She also expresses joy for being accepted for her quote-unquote ugly sides and makes a plea to love herself just as much as her partner loves her. I'll be honest with y'all for a minute, brutally honest. I did not like this song when it first came out. I thought it was kind of a snooze fest. I loved what it represented, but it just didn't click with me for the longest time, and I couldn't understand it because all my friends loved it, everyone online loved it, and I just was not getting it. I didn't hate it, but it just was not my cup of tea. But I eventually came around, and I love it now. It's one of my favorite Ariana songs. So I saw the light eventually, but yeah, I don't know why it didn't click for me in the beginning. My past feelings about it aside, POV is a perfect ending to this album, and by extension a perfect ending to the saga of healing for Ariana. It's a beautiful expression of unconditional love and finding happiness. While the song didn't receive an official video, a lyric video was released coinciding with the 6-month anniversary of Positions. The deluxe edition of Positions was released on February 19th, 2021, and featured 5 additional tracks: Someone Like You, Test Drive, the 3435 remix, Worst Behavior, and Main Thing. These tracks add so much to the main album that it felt wrong not to bring them up. These underrated deluxe tracks are some of the best in Ariana's whole catalog in my opinion, and they deserve so much more attention. Worthy of note, this was the first time one of Ariana's albums received a proper deluxe edition since My Everything back in 2014. Dangerous Woman and Thank You Next technically had deluxe editions, but the former's deluxe edition was the standard edition here in the United States, and the deluxe edition of Thank You Next was a Japan exclusive. Promotion for Positions was rather low-key. Ariana made very few appearances to promote the album, not that she needed to though. It was her first album ever to not receive a supporting world tour. However, given the state of the world at the time, that was completely understandable. While not directly related to the album, Ariana made a surprise appearance to perform Them Changes with Thundercat at the Adult Swim Festival in November 2020. In July 2021, she released a series of intimate performances through Vivo, marking the live debut of POV, Positions, Safety Net with Ty Dolla $ign, My Hair, 3435, and Off the Table with The Weeknd. While the album may have lacked in promotion and singles, Ariana made up for it with a number of guest appearances on multiple songs throughout 2021. She appeared on Met Him Last Night, a song she penned for Demi Lovato's album Dancing with the Devil, The Art of Starting Over. The song was released as the 4th and final single from the album on April 13th, 2021. Just 9 days later, Ariana would appear on the official remix for the Weeknd single Save Your Tears, which was the final single from his massively successful album After Hours. The two performed the song together at the 2021 iHeartRadio Music Awards. Ariana would also appear on the song I Don't Do Drugs on Doja Cat's third studio album Planet Her. The song wasn't released as a single, unfortunately. Positions is a very special album to me. It's my comfort album. It is my favorite album out of Ariana's entire discography and one of my favorite albums of all time. There was a certain confidence and self-assurance about Ariana during this era. She had conquered pop music and had nothing left to prove. She'd overcome her past traumas and moved past all of the hurt. She'd found love both internally and externally. This trilogy of albums is so important to me and is one of my favorite album runs in all of pop music. These days, she's busy with her makeup line, R.E.M. Beauty, and her upcoming role in Wicked, and has admitted that new music from her has yet to be recorded.
The truth is, I have not begun an album. After Positions, was not ready to start another album yet, so I have not begun another album.
Of course, I'd love new music from her, but I am perfectly satisfied with what we have for now, ultimately because she's happy. I can't wait to see how Ariana will return to music and how this new chapter of her life will influence her sound.